Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I am really excited to be back here with you after a bit of an absence. I've explained a couple of personal things that are going on, specifically the passing of my mother, which was, under normal circumstances, that alone is like, oh my gosh, that's got to be hard, right? But as I've been very honest and open with all of you, my relationship with my mother was very, very strange and very, very complicated and nuanced. And it doesn't feel like, missing someone so much. It's not that kind of grief, right? That it's not like, normally when someone dies, I think what we do is we feel sad because of the change we're experiencing in our experience, right? And so that means like, well, I'm not going to get to see this person anymore, or we think of all the different things in our lives in which this person fit in, and that's not going to be there anymore. And that's the thing that causes us to grieve, in at least in some part, right? We miss that person, right? Well, it's weird because I don't have any of that. I hadn't seen my mother in, over a year. I hadn't talked to her for more than 5 minutes. Actually, no, I hadn't talked to her in over a year. I haven't seen her in over 5 years. And I hadn't, had more than a 5 minute conversation with her in the last 30 years. So it's like, so it's not, the grief that I'm feeling is not so much as a loss, but the grief I'm feeling is coming from the churning up of the trauma that I'm experiencing. And so I appreciate all of you bearing with me. I mean, there's no crowd of people outside my home with pitchforks and torches and stuff. And I appreciate that. I really, really do. But it's good to be back here. Now, I do have a couple of things I want to talk to you about before I come up with today, or before we get into today's topic. So, number one, I want to let you know that, because, again, as I just talked about, all of the difficulty that I've experienced over these last 3 weeks or so, that since this thing happened with my mother, and it was also very sudden and very unexpected. It wasn't nobody expected this. None of her doctors, none of her caretakers, nobody expected this to happen. So it was like a bucket of cold trauma water right in my face, and so the trauma has been so alive for me that the first announcement I want to make to you is that I'm going to be doing a workshop on Saturday, May 28th at 11:30 a.m. Mountain Time. Okay, that would be 1:30 in the afternoon on the East Coast, 10:30 on the West Coast, and at 12:30 on the Central, in the Central time zone. And so, I'm going to be doing this workshop on trauma, okay? And the trauma, and what we're going to be covering is we're going to be covering not only, what trauma is and how it works, and of course how, we're going to talk about how we can cope with trauma, how we can understand it, how we can, process it in a really beneficial way, okay? But we're also going to be talking about, I'm going to be sharing some personal stuff, as I always do, just to give you an example of how things work and stuff like that. But this is also an opportunity for you to understand your trauma on a different level, right? Because it's, yes, I'm gonna be talking about me, but in the process of this workshop, my goal is for you to understand maybe some of the things that you experience in your here and now that may be attributable to trauma that happened a long time ago, because that's how sneaky it is, right? It is the sneakiest thing in that sense that it's the nervous system response that we're having right now has nothing to do with, or has very little to do with, what we're experiencing right now. Those of us who have had trauma in our past, and in that sense, it's not, as I've told you the story about the kid, the young lady at Chipotle, right? Like when I go into when I go into that Chipotle and I find that there's some resistance, there's some conflict in the way that my daughter, who, I can't allow my daughter to think that I'm going to abandon her, right? And so the way that my daughter's quesadilla has to be made, they're not able to do, and so in that moment, it has nothing to do with this, 22-year-old girl on the other side of the counter, or the fact that my daughter can't get exactly the quesadilla that she wants. It has to do with me being in a situation 45 years ago where I was made over and over and over made to go into these adult situations and handle myself, and I had no support, and I always believed that if I failed, my parents were going to abandon me. Right? So here it is. It's not about like to me, to my nervous system, it's not just about a quesadilla, whether the salsa is inside or outside the quesadilla. It's about my daughter's gonna, think I'm gonna leave her if I don't get this right. And in that moment, I am in full blown stress and threat response, and that's the thing, right? It's just a tension that arises. It's not some thought process that, oh, this is just like being in that bakery when you were 8 years old and really overwhelmed and couldn't figure it out. And nobody was there to help you, and your mom yelled at you because you got the wrong rye bread and stuff like that, right? It's not a conscious act. It's a nervous system response, and your nervous system is like the medium. It's like the canvas on which your life is painted, and so it's the very ground on which we stand, and that very ground becomes this tumultuous, churning, just bubbling thing of trauma, and it's all tension, and it's all fear, and it's all anger, and it's all this stuff that has nothing to do with this young lady telling me that my daughter can't have her quesadilla the way that she wants it. Right? But now here's the thing, and this is what the workshop is going to be all about, is that the more I can understand that this is why this is happening, that's how I get to process the trauma. That's how I get to understand my own body response. I don't have to know, you don't have to necessarily go through therapy to figure out the trauma, right? You just got to connect some dots. That's all. And this is one of the things we're going to be talking about in the workshop next Saturday. Not this coming Saturday, not 2 days from now, but 10 days from now, whatever it is, right? So I hope you can join it. It's free. I do accept donations. The suggested donation is $15. It's going to be about a two-hour workshop. So the $15 is like money well spent. I promise you that. We'll do a meditation, which is going to help to understand the trauma. And I have a great meditation to do with you on this. And then we're going to do, then I'll give you the lecture. And then at the end of the lecture, it's question and answers. And I'm famous for this. Okay, in a very small circle, I'm famous for staying as long as it takes for the question and answers, right? So, like, if I have to sit there for another 2.5 hours, I will sit there for another 2.5 hours until every question is answered. My calendar is wide open on Saturday, and it's all for you, all right? And so I hope you can make it. I really do. Now, this segues into the second announcement that I want to make, and this is you're the first ones hearing about this. I haven't even told my wife about this one yet. Okay, and so the big news is that I'm going to be launching another podcast. It doesn't mean this podcast is going away. It's not. As I've talked about a lot recently, I'm trying to redefine this podcast a little bit. It's been 4 years now that we've been doing this, for the most part every day for 4 years, until recently, and so it feels like it wants to change. It feels like it needs to evolve into something different from what it is. Not necessarily different, but something, it needs to evolve. That's all it feels like. And so I'm still sort of trying to find that way. I want to try to maybe do some more interviews on this podcast. And I also want to maybe, instead of doing an everyday, okay, this is just what popped into Art's mind today, maybe do something more, like maybe once a week do a really bigger episode, something more substantial, And I also want to get into, and this maybe is another function of this particular Showing Up to Life podcast, I want to get into something about the news, right? Because so much of what we read in the news, if we can look at what we're seeing through the lens of mindfulness and compassion and self-compassion and kindness, we're going to look at the news much differently too, and all the stuff that they're telling us on the news, right? And so I want to, promote some critical thinking and some understanding on a deeper level. And so that's all up in the air. But the new podcast that I'm going to launch, and it's going to be a couple of weeks from now. I already have the first 5 or 6 episodes mapped out, ready to go. But I want to make sure I get like a nice logo and maybe some background music. I'm going to see if I can do this a little bit more professionally, let's say, right? But anyway, the podcast is going to be called Trauma Talks. Okay, and it's going to be it's sort of a double entendre there. So trauma talks, meaning that we're going to just talk about trauma, right? And I am going to have some interviews. I have some experts in trauma lined up. I have some mental health professionals. I have some coaches. I have some people who have just experienced trauma. And so so we're going to do some interviews. But in the first few weeks, it's going to be more about kind of talking about trauma more in this sort of format. And so the double entendre is that, we're going to be talking about trauma, but we're also going to explore how trauma takes our voice, because that's what it is, right? Again, in that Chipotle example that I gave you, in that moment, trauma is speaking for me, right? Trauma is in control. I'm no longer in control. And so we're going to talk about that in this podcast. And we're going to talk about how we can sort of, work with that, not overcome that, because that's a tough deal, but how we can work with it. Okay. So anyway, keep your eyes out for that. I'll be making announcements here, and I'm going to ask you to tell all your friends, right? And even if you don't listen to the podcast, I'm going to ask you a favor, just to log on and down, click on it, maybe, if you like it or whatever, it'll help with the algorithms, right? That kind of stuff. But we'll get more into that later. But anyway, I'm really, really excited about this podcast. But again, I'm not letting go of this Showing Up to Life podcast. This is very near and dear to my heart. All right. So last night, every Wednesday night, I do a guided meditation, right? It's about an hour and 15-minute meeting. We start out, we've changed the format a little bit. We start out with a kind of say a 10, 15, maybe 20-minute discussion about a topic, right, that I'm bringing to the meeting, right? And then from that topic, we go into a meditation that sort of works around that topic, right? And then when we come out of the meditation is usually about 30 minutes or so, and we come out of the meditation, then we talk a little bit more. Okay, so this is what I meant, and this is how we connect these dots and that kind of stuff. And then we do a little, then I open it up for anything anybody wants to say, and then we do a little reading from a pocket Thich Nhat Hanh that I keep on my desk, and that's oftentimes the most amazing part of the meeting, because it's like every time, including last night, it's like Thich Nhat Hanh is sitting there listening to us. The passage and we do it, just somebody call out a number, and then I go to that page, and it's like every time it's like exactly what we were talking about. It's amazing. And this happened again last night. But anyway, one of the things that and the topic that Tay was talking about, that's Thich Nhat Hanh's nickname, Tay, Thay. The question that somebody had asked, which kind of inspired this whole discussion, and which Tay sort of rounded out for us, was all about the idea of escape. Right now, this person who had raised the question in our group, and it's a very beautiful little group we have. We have a core of about 5 or 6 people who show up every single week, and then then there'll be 2 or 3 new people here, 2 or 3 new people there, and it's, again, this is a free resource, and you are so welcome to come. You will receive coaching, and you will receive meditation practice, and it is very valuable. Okay, and the people who are in this group, through no other work but this group, they write me emails just like my coaching clients write me emails, and like, this has changed my life. I can't believe how happy I am and how in control of my life I feel now. And I've never felt this way before, just from these, hour and 15-minute meetings every Wednesday, right? So come check it out. But anyway, one of the people was saying that her friend, she was talking to a friend of hers, and her friend was saying that people who do meditation and people who do yoga and spiritual work, they're all just trying to escape the reality of what's happening, right? And that, of course, that like my spidey sense went nuts when I heard that. I shouldn't say went nuts. My spidey sense became very, very activated when I heard that. And so where do we start, right? I mean, this is the kind of thing where it's like, I have so much to say here, but the idea here is that let's talk about this in a couple of ways, right? So we've discussed here in this podcast before, pardon me, this concept of escape, and it must be noted that it's true. Pardon me, it's true that many people who come into this practice do so with the intention of escaping somehow or escaping something, let's say, right? And it is very true that it is a potential in this work, right? Like a lot of people, like I think even Thich Nhat Hanh says this a lot, and we're going to talk about him today a great deal. But pardon me, I have this little tickle from my allergies in my throat, so I got a little lozenge. Hopefully, we're not going to have to pause here, but bear with me, please. But anyway, I think even Thich Nhat Hanh says that, or had said that, that we can escape into the meditation center or into the Buddhist center or into the yoga studio, right? Like that can be a sanctuary in which we can hide out and be shielded from the news and the wars and the hunger and the baby formula shortages and all of the stuff that we see going on around us, right? And this is something that's often referred to as bliss bypass or spiritual bypass, right? Where you're literally trying to use your spiritual work in order to bypass the reality that stands in front of you, right? Now, again, it's tricky because, yes, people do this because it works, right? It definitely works to do this. It will accomplish that goal for you. Okay? So that's where it's very tricky, right? Because it's not the kind of thing where you can say, oh, no, that's absurd, right? Now, it's also true that in a sort of kind of alternate look at it, right, is that you could also look at it the way that corporations use mindfulness programs to get their employees to work harder, Like, for instance, Amazon they have these like, I don't know what they call them, but basically mindfulness pods, right? It's basically a little tank you can go in and there's a plant and they're probably piping in some music and maybe some oxygen. And the idea is that you can go in there and, sit for 5 minutes and then after that, you'll be ready to go back on the line and work yourself to death, right? Now, of course, I think it's beautiful that corporations are offering their employees something that's beautiful, right? I'd rather see them offer a more living wage and more reasonable hours and stuff like that. But hey, better than nothing, I suppose, right? And then there's also people who get into mindfulness and emotional intelligence aspect of mindfulness in order to be able to sell people stuff, right? And so the concept then becomes all about intention, right? What is your intention? Is your intention to use this work to bypass something, to escape from something, or to manipulate something? Or is your intention to use this work, which you can also use it for, to become more engaged in what's happening around you? Thich Nhat Hanh, there he is again. When he was very active, and I do mean the word active, like he was very active in the Vietnam War. He did a lot of peace activism. He marched with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He worked a lot with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. He was known for his advocacy and his activism in these realms. And to the point where he actually called, there's a whole, school or discipline of Buddhism that Thich Nhat Hanh was instrumental in founding, which is called engaged Buddhism, right? Which is actually using the concept of Buddhism and the practices of mindfulness and compassion and metta and loving kindness, which is metta, to use these practices and the skills these practices provide us, to use these to become more engaged, more connected to the horrors that we see, to allow it to use these practices to become more active, to allow for that activism to happen. All right. Now this is important, right? Because mindfulness is nothing more than the ability to control our attention, to train our attention on something, and then just the ability to accept things as they are, and not judging, and looking at things with a level of kindness. That's all it is. And so you can apply that to whichever way you want to go, right? And so again, mindfulness itself, it's like having a hammer, right? Like you could use a hammer to build a house, or you could use a hammer to destroy a house. The hammer doesn't change. The hammer is just a tool. It's about what your intention with that tool is going to be. But now here, there's another twist to this, right? Because in a very real way, mindfulness is an escape. In its very essence, it's an escape, but not an escape the way that my friend's friend was talking about. Mindfulness and the practices of being present and noticing what is as opposed to what could be and what should be and all that judgy stuff, right? But to look at things without judgment, and to be present with things without judgment, with acceptance, with compassion. This is an escape. And it's an escape from the delusion, or several different delusions, right? Number one, as Buddha said, it's the delusion of separateness, right? Like as we cultivate this awareness through mindfulness practices, we understand that we are not separate. We are very much connected. We are very much the same as each other. We also come to an awareness of non-duality, or let's say non-digital thinking, right? That things are not bad or good, things are bad and good. That everything is bad and good, because it's only a matter of our perception and our intention. And so there's lots of escaping that we do. I'm just going to check my notes here real quick, because I feel like there was another really big point about this. I had a great concept of this too, right? So mindfulness are a great example of this. So last night, right, I went into my meditation, and the New York Rangers are playing their playoff games, and it's game one of the second round. And I went into meditation. The Rangers were up 1-0, right? I come out of the meditation, and the Rangers lost the game 3-2 in overtime. Nothing I can do about that. It is what it is, right? But the practice of mindfulness allows me to see that it's just a game, right? I don't need to suffer because the Rangers lost a game, right? But of course, that was my initial thing. It was, oh no, they lost. How could I miss it? What, as though my watching it was going to make them not lose, right? Which every sports fan feels that on some level, right? Like when the Giants won the Super Bowl, I literally had the same, I think it was a penny that I found on the floor of just before the first game of the playoffs was played. I was at the store and I found a penny with the heads up, and I put it in that little, extra pocket in a pair of jeans, like a little tiny pocket that's inside the front pocket. Well, I put the penny in there and literally didn't wash the jeans, and didn't. I insisted on wearing those jeans every single game, and they kept winning. So for me, I'm the reason they won the Super Bowl, right? But of course, that's not true, right? I mean, yeah, who knows? Maybe I had some influence. Yes, I'm open to that possibility, right? But if I don't watch, they're still going to play the games, right? If I don't find that penny, they're still going to play the games, right? And me having this penny does not affect gravitational pulls and misreads of defensemen and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, they were getting into some really difficult stuff. But the point is that mindfulness is an escape from that. Right, it's an escape from this prison of needing things to be a certain way. Right, mindfulness allows us to escape that and to come into contact with the understanding of the acceptance of, I should say, suchness, as the Buddhists call it. Right, this is the way things are. The Rangers lost the hockey game. That's the way the world. That's the way our experience in this moment is. And there's nothing that's going to change that. There's no way for me to go back in time and to change the outcome of that game. So in the past, again, I would ruminate. I would be angry. I might have even canceled meditation last night because of the Ranger game. And think of what that would have done, right? We wouldn't even be having this conversation now if I had done that. Right? And so mindfulness is what allows me to stay here with it, to show up to life without all of that, agitation and animosity and anger and big, heavy emotions. So anyway, I hope that makes sense. So again, it comes down to the intention, right? And that's always what it's going to be. And so the question of, the intention then is the essential part of this work, right? Like what is my intention? And I invite you to set a daily intention in the morning. First thing when you wake up, what is your intention for today? I set an intention. It's almost always the same thing. I am going to use this day that I've been given as a gift to what do I usually word it in the sense of, I'm going to use the time and energy of this day to practice and to spread compassion and kindness to everyone that I can. Right? That's my intention going throughout the day. Now, does that mean that I don't get frustrated with somebody sometimes and say, oh, that person's such a jerk? That's not very kind or compassionate, right? Does it happen? Yes, it happens. Of course it happens. And in that moment, though, because I set the intention in that moment, I reckon, something's off here. Something's misaligned here. Oh, yeah, my intention, kindness. Let me forgive this person who I feel like was such a jerk. Let me practice some kindness towards them. And that's the way this works. All right, folks. So I hope you found that episode helpful or pleasant or enjoyable or entertaining or whatever it is that makes you watch this podcast. I hope I came through for you today. I wish you well. I know that a couple of people have written in some questions and some topics that you want me to cover, and I'm getting to them. I promise you. It's just these last few weeks have just been really, really strange and difficult. So please bear with me. I promise there's a couple of people who have asked questions. I'm getting to them. I promise you in the next couple of days you'll see an episode that addresses your concerns, okay? And again, I will let you know about the Trauma Talks podcast, again, probably in a week or so. We'll get that going. I really want to plan it out right, too, because I'm going to do it on 1 day a week. It's just going to be a once-a-week podcast. So I want to figure out, all the logistics before I just, because I have a tendency to just jump and then say, uh-oh, like Wile E. Coyote, hanging off the cliff and, midair, I forgot. I can't do it every day, So I'm just trying to take it a little slower and learn from some past mistakes and learn from some past lessons, I should say, and do this right. Okay, so please bear with me. No more than a week or two, and also please join my mailing list. Okay, I will put a link in the description today to join my mailing list, because that's where you're going to see most of the information that I have to give you. Yeah, sure, I can put stuff here in a podcast, but if you didn't listen to this whole thing, you might have missed a few things, right? So a few details. So the mailing list is the way that I'll always be able to reach out to you. Okay, so when I do a trauma workshop in a few weeks, right, or this one that's coming up in a week and a half, and then the next one after that, the mailing list is how you're going to find out about that the most efficiently. Okay, so I will put a link in the description. Please click on it. Name, I think it's just first name and email address. It's like really simple. Maybe the last name, but I never. Please understand, I never ever sell, and nobody's asked me to buy any information anyway. But I would never. I don't care if somebody offers me $1,000,000. I would never sell your information to some, marketing list person or something like that. Okay, so please understand that. All right, and of course you can unsubscribe anytime. All right, everybody, thanks a lot. I wish you well. I'll be back again soon. See you then.